Hello, everyone. Welcome to Real Food Recovery. This is episode 16. We are so excited you are here. Today, we are talking all about attitude. Why do we even talk about attitude? And before I get into that, Jamie, I had someone contact me today. We had episode 8 release on Spotify and Apple.
Mhm.
And so we have a listener question that we're going to put at the beginning of the hour.
Awesome.
They needed to know after they listened to our episode 8, what is the cleaning product that Jamie talked about her friend using on the sink? Do you remember that story you told?
I do. She thanked her past self, her future self thanked her
Yes,
past
because
self.
she
I
cleans her
don't know.
sink at night and everything's so sparkly.
I
That's
don't
what
know.
our
That's
listeners want to
hilarious.
know. And quite frankly, I want to know too.
I
So
will find out. I will ask
make a
my
note.
friend. I will ask my friend. I'm going to actually text her now. I'm going to
Yeah.
ask her if she gets back to me while we're filming this episode.
Oh, yeah.
I
Yeah.
will let
This
you
is
know.
critical. And stop everything, everybody. So you go text your friend, and I'm going to tell you a little bit about attitude. That is what our episode 16 is about today. We also call it thought life. It's one of the branches of our recovery. And we talk about our tree of life, and we have these deep roots in our tree. And then we have the trunk that's the food. And then we have these branches. Some branches are bigger than other branches, but they all produce things. And attitude, it's up to you if you want to consider that one of the bigger branches of the tree or smaller branches of a tree, but it's definitely part of a well-balanced life, just like you have a well-balanced tree in order for it to stay upright and stable. So, what even is attitude? One of the things that we know is attitude shapes your success and happiness. It's basically the foundation of who we are. And it's a settled way of thinking or feeling about someone or some things. And it's related to our behavior. Everybody knows when somebody has a bad attitude, right? Few people hide that. So that is something that we wanted to bring and make that an integral part of our recovery. We talk about what is thought life, and we've decided it's observing the thoughts we have on a regular basis and noticing which ones bring us closer to our goals and the ones that take us further from our goals. So, we're going to get into, does attitude really matter? What's the big deal about it anyway? And I want to start out with a story. You have heard me, if you've been following us, telling about my husband who was hit with sepsis a year ago. And I might have mentioned this component of the story on a previous podcast cast, but it bears reminding that when he made it to the hospital, he was very sick by the time he got there because we just thought he had the flu. So he was at home probably almost 18 hours at least after we could tell that symptoms had started in. So they told us when we got there that things were grim. And the doctor pulled me into the hallway and said, this is a 50-50 deal with sepsis. And I'm starting to, sink into a puddle. He said, but there's one thing that changes someone from 50-50 to 60-40, and that is their attitude. And he had that. We had that. We had a purpose. So after 10 weeks in the hospital, 3 major surgeries, several small procedures, he was put on dialysis, he was given chemo, he had to learn to swallow again, eat again. This attacked literally every organ in his body. His vision was blurry, he was in extreme pain. He would eventually lose both of his legs, and then he would be sent to rehab to try and even be able to transfer from a bed to a wheelchair was a monumental feat for us. But for him, I never remember him complaining one time, even when things were at their worst. And it's interesting that the doctors, they understand how much attitude makes a difference. They don't give you a medical explanation. Oftentimes they say, I don't know why this affects us, but we understand that
Absolutely.
attitude affects us on a cellular level. A positive attitude may enable you to reduce your stress, cope with challenges in a healthy and productive way, achieve goals, and maintain overall mental and physical wellness. It really just reflects the way you see the world and thus affects every aspect of your life: health, relationships, happiness, well being, and success. Attitude is the most important factor in determining how well we do in life.
Yes, 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 yes. And I just couldn't agree more, Paige. And what is so beautiful, and I was with you cheering, you on, cheering your husband on during his medical, his trials, right, in the last
Right.
year. And I was listening, and when you would give an update, and I could not believe, what he was going through, what you were going through. And I could not believe how you were just so resilient to not only encouraging him, but staying on track yourself. You never,
Yeah.
went back into the food. You never went back, into a pity party. You never went back into that mindset. Not even an old mindset. It's never your mindset. It's not been your mindset that I've known you to,
Yeah.
to question. You just keep moving forward.
Yeah.
And that attitude reminds me, his and yours reminds me of my father-in-law talking. My mother-in-law, I actually never met my mother-in-law. I feel like I know her, but I
Mm.
never met her. She passed away in 2020, and
Mm.
she had a long battle, a few-year battle with, cancer. And I remember my father-in-law talking to me about her, because we talk a lot about her, and I ask him questions all the time about his wife. And it's my way of keeping her alive, and it's my way of honoring her memory. And it's also just, I'm curious. I want to know who she was.
Yeah.
And he talked about her cancer battle, and as she was losing her life, and losing different aspects of her life, and her, her countenance. He said she never complained. She
Mm.
never complained. And she explained to her grandkids, and she explained to her children, and of course to her husband, who understood, this is God's plan for me. There's nothing to complain about. There's nothing to be sad about. This is God's plan for me. Let's rejoice in knowing that I'm here, and I was here, and what we had, and what we do have today. And that was it. And I used to think that my husband and his family were like burying their feelings about losing their mom. And they were like, no, like it was God's plan. Like, she was at peace. And frankly, she's in a way better place than she was when she was here on this earth. So
Yeah.
it's, because she was in so much pain, and had so many, ailments going on, as her body was starting to shut down. And there were, it was so hard to watch her in that kind of pain.
Yeah.
And so, just to hear attitude about what a difference it makes, even though she knew she was, you know, she knew she was terminal. I mean, we all are, right? But she knew it, her time was limited on this earth, and she chose to look at it still in a way that was life-giving, instead of, life stealing, or, pitiful.
That so you've brought something to my mind about, we have friends around the corner, family. We go to church with them. They have 6 boys, all within about 10 years. They're a great family.
Mhm.
And one of the sons was graduating this past Sunday from high school. He was the president of his class, and he was giving a speech, and he ended up referencing my husband and his story. And because he was giving this inspiring speech to the graduating
Wow.
class. And when he was done, his mom sent me the copy of the speech. I videoed him. She didn't know he was going to say that, and I turned to my husband after, we were weeping watching this video. But
Oh.
um, I said, you could have been just another tragic story,
Mhm.
but instead, you're someone with a tragic story that people want to reshare.
That's
That's the difference.
exactly.
I've also told, I don't think I've talked about this on the podcast, but one of our surgeons was telling us a story about 2 women that had babies right around the same time, C-section. They
Mm.
both got sepsis, both lost their legs and part of their hands, and one
Oh,
woman to this day remains in a wheelchair, bitter, angry,
yeah.
did not progress, and the other mother is back to doing absolutely everything that she did before. And he said the difference was their outlook, their attitude,
Amazing.
everything that happens above the neck, is what catapults us forward in life. Have we talked about that story about Corrie ten Boom? This one is so profound that I have got to share this one. It's about the
Let's
German
talk.
the German concentration camps that this little Jewish girl was in with her sister and some of the other obviously people that she knew, and they were infested with fleas. All these concentration camps were just infested with fleas, and everybody was bemoaning and complaining. And she's like, no. There's a book on her, Corrie ten Boom. She said, I'm grateful. I have gratitude in the fleas. It keeps the guards out. They won't come in here and molest us or hurt us or beat us or anything like that.
Mhm.
These fleas are here to protect us. So there is nothing in this world that you cannot change as far as your perception.
Yes.
And it changes everything from dark to light,
Yes.
from misery to happy. So
Mhm.
I love the gift that we all innately have of attitude.
Yes.
So if you're struggling with a negative attitude, how do you turn that frown upside down? Do you have any tips that you want to share?
Yeah. Well, I'll be a little transparent here. I have attitude was not something that has been modeled well for me by members of certain members of my family, not all, but the ones that I was exposed to day in, day out, had a very different perspective and a very different approach to attitude. There was a lot of self-pity, there was a lot of self flatulation, self-blame, and there was a lot of resentment, and there was a lot of unforgiveness in my family of origin. Some of it was my culture of origin, some of it was my society and the social construct, some of it was related to the religion of origin. And some of it was just family traits that were passed down generation to generation, some of those, those dysfunctional family traits. So I never had it modeled for me to
Mm,
to to have an attitude that was, um, looking at things, as blessings or as opportunities or as lessons instead of
mhm.
curses or horrible things or things to throw a pity party. And as a result, most of my life, I threw pity parties for myself, like Elton John threw Oscar parties back in his heyday. No cost spared pity parties, right? And of course, when I was in the food, they involved a lot of processed food. But
Mhm.
after I got out of the food, I still had this resentment and pity and self, shaming and blaming. And I would go into these places that, I didn't have food anymore. So I mean, I just spun and spun in my head.
Mhm.
Or I would slam things and just be real irritable and just all of these personality traits that really aren't me. I'm not that way. I'm very loving and I'm very glass half full and I'm very positive. But I would get in these modes thinking that this was sort of like my family curse. Like this is what members of my family did, and that's what I had to deal with too. No, it was just modeling that I didn't realize I had internalized as truth, but it wasn't truth. It was a choice I was
Mhm.
making.
Mhm.
And so one of the biggest lessons in my recovery of the last 5 years of my recovery has been around attitude and about choosing to look at things differently. I have my moments, as you know, when I first, made the move from New Jersey to Texas, I had about a 6-month pity party for myself, and now not ironically, it makes total sense that I had come back into processed food at that time. I was using artificial sweeteners in
Mm.
my morning oatmeal, and it had enough of an effect on me that I got into real negative patterns,
Wow.
and I negative thought patterns, and the resentments, and I mean, I would just spin and spin and spin, and it was soul depleting in every way, not only to myself but to others around me, right? All my relationships were affected. And so yes, it was the food for sure, but it was also so many things that I was choosing that I knew that I could have chose differently and didn't want to.
Mhm. Mhm.
So So when I think about Corey Ten Boom, or I think about anyone like your husband, you, and anyone that goes through these major life challenges and comes out, with a positive attitude, I'm amazed. It's amazing.
Yeah. Yeah. It's, you're right. It takes a little bit of effort because we are pre-wired to lean towards the negative.
Hmm.
That's just how our genetic makeup is. It's part of our survival system. So it
Mhm.
does take a little bit of effort, more so to lean towards the positive. One of the things that I know about when you're struggling with a negative attitude
Uh-huh.
is changing the focus from attitude to behavior. So we know that our actions drag our emotions. For
That's right.
example, I
Yes.
like my boss. I like my boss. I like my boss. If you keep saying that 1,000 times, pretty soon your brain goes, "Oh, we like our boss. We like
Mood
going."
mood
Yeah.
follows action. Mood follows action.
Yes, that's right. Or the converse can be true. We can talk ourselves into a stomach ache.
Yeah.
Just whatever you're telling yourself, your your emotions will catch up to that. So, for example, there was an upcoming trip that I did not want to do. I hate traveling by plane anymore. But I
Uh-huh.
had to tell myself, "Just knock it off. We're gonna look at these travel days as reading days or Netflix days, and
Mhm.
there's gonna be some airplanes shuffling around interspersed between,
Yeah.
movies or chapters," and it actually helped change everything for me. After I had planned, that I would be doing that, I all of a sudden was looking forward to the travel day of just having a down day and doing a little guilty pleasure reading or catching up on some silly comedy.
Yeah.
That really helped. It changed my attitude for sure.
That's right. That's
Any
right. That's right.
anything else you wanna add about, any of your wisdom on changing attitudes?
Yeah, it really helped. Speaking of travel, we talked about it on past episodes, but I had a 2 weeks travel stint, almost 2 weeks, where I was traveling to and from Texas to New Jersey. And, there were all kinds of things that went wrong between plane flight changes and gate changes,
Yeah.
and, trying to get connecting flights rescheduled and rebooked, to a car breaking down, to having to beg for rides places. I mean, it was from friends. I wasn't,
On
hitchhiking.
this
But I mean, it was just one thing after another. And I finally get to my place in Jersey, and the heat's broken. It's 40 degrees and it's raining and it's by the shore. So
Oh my gosh.
it's like a whole thing, right? It's like one thing after another. And I was like, I need to choose. Like, I feel like I'm getting, the universe is schooling me right now on how to choose a positive attitude again and again and again and again and again. And I did. I kept a positive attitude for the most part about 80% of the time. And that, considering
Yeah,
where it's coming from, that was pretty good.
huge. Yes,
Pretty
huge.
good.
That
Uh,
was a remarkable story.
and I have, but there were times, and I had to be honest with myself, like when I was fried and I was done, like I was like, I can't do another wrench in the gears here. Um,
Mhm.
I would be honest with myself and be like, okay, have a little moment, wrench in the gears. This does stink, but I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna, self-talk myself out of this, because
Mhm.
guess what? Nobody's coming to save me. Nobody's
Mhm.
coming to save me. It's got to be me.
Mhm. I will brag on Jamie. During that time, we were doing some filming, and I knew that she was exhausted, but you know what? This girl still showed up with a smile on her face, and she delivered even when she was on empty. So that takes a lot. It says a lot about you. It really reflects how you perceive things and your level of professionalism, quite frankly.
Thank you.
So you're to be applauded. So, that kind of leads into the next topic I want to talk about is when you are around people with a negative attitude, isn't it just like a wet blanket all over you? I mean, negative attitude really from others, it affects everyone
Everything.
around you, not yourself. Though those people that are sour, it's unbearable. I can't get away from them fast enough. I've mentioned my friend Jennifer on here before. She's always positive and bubbly, and she's who I climb my mountain with every year on my birthday, my 14,000-foot mountain out on Pikes Peak in August. Anybody that wants to come, there's room on the trail.
It's
So
amazing.
it takes us about 8 hours. So the first 7 hours, no problem. But that last hour is a real bear. That's when fatigue and altitude set in, and then it is really the only thing between you and the top of the mountain is your attitude. Because I have had people with me. One year we had 16 people, and those people that started getting negative, they had a horrible experience. The pain was exponentially more painful. The cold
Yes.
was exponentially more cold. The the um the steepness of the mountain was exponentially steeper.
Yeah.
Everything just got so much worse for me. But on the flip side, I had a girlfriend named Marcy join us one time. Last minute, she decided to do it. She hadn't really trained, but it even rained on us. But she had a positive attitude the whole way through. And that was the year, this has never happened to me before. Um, that we so afternoon storms come up every afternoon in Colorado. Unfortunately, there's lightning too, and so we tried to be off the mountain by 2:30.
Right.
This storm came a little bit earlier. We don't care about the rain. We do care about the rain. We care about the lightning because by the time those storms come up, we're above tree line and we have no protection.
Right.
But even though when it was starting to rain, the most important thing when you're hiking is to stay dry for your feet, especially. But
Yes.
otherwise, hypothermia can set in. You've got to stay dry. Since she had decided last minute to join us, she didn't have a poncho. I happened to have one extra poncho at the bottom of my backpack because I had done a half marathon in Las Vegas, like a few months prior to that.
So you had it in
Unfor-
there.
Unfortunately, it was an aluminum, it's like a heater poncho that people put on
Oh,
after races,
yeah.
but that's all I had. So I had to give it to her and she was wearing it and there was some lightning in the distance. And I looked at her and I said, "Oh." She said, "What?" And I said, "Oh, nothing. You just look so pretty." What? She had her hair was standing on top of her head. But I said, "You just look so pretty, but I'm gonna need to get that poncho back right away."
Yeah.
But even when we were in those dire circumstances, I don't think her smile ever left her face. She's just a naturally positive,
Amazing.
bubbly person. So it's just another story of people, inspiration from what is possible for us to
Yes.
do as humans. Do you have any comments on any of that?
Yeah. No, it makes total sense. And I think about all the ways that I've made my life harder, right? Again, it was
Good
modeled from what
point.
was taught to me, but I've made my life so
Yes.
much harder than it needed to be.
Yeah.
And I'm sure my recovery was harder than it needed to be in certain stages. But it's so interesting when I think about a negative attitude or maybe false beliefs, right? False self beliefs about,
Mhm.
I think about it, I equate it as holding on, like white knuckling
Yeah.
grip on a bar and not wanting, or a side of a mountain, just to borrow your story. What if I let go? Will I be okay if I let myself fall?
Yeah.
And that's really what it is. It's am I gonna trust that the universe has me no matter what? No
Yeah.
matter what, it's like my negative attitude is almost a way for me to try to control a situation because, oh, I just know it's going to be this way.
Yeah.
And it is, because of
Yeah.
course it is.
Yeah. I
But
I love I loved what you said about I made things harder for me because when our kids were little and they would be acting up and acting a fool, I would say, "Is what you're doing helping the family or hurting the family?" And it's a joke to everyone. I know they're going to be saying it to their kids too, but it's true. Why make it harder than it
yes,
has to be? So,
yes,
we all run into people with a negative attitude. What happens to people? How did this start? Where do negative attitudes come from? What causes it? Do you have
I,
an opinion?
yes, a hundred. Well, in my experience, it's just my experience, but 100%. I think it's a family of origin. It's something's modeled for
Mm,
people. There
mhm.
are some chemical imbalances in people's brains and bodies
Yeah.
that can cause that, a dopamine deficiency. And, I've got that too. That can dispose people sort of negatively to a negative bias. But really, it's usually childhood things that either are modeled for them or there's traumatic events that
Yeah.
create this state of hypervigilance where you're always looking
Mm-hmm.
for something wrong in your environment, that you're always looking
Mm-hmm.
for something wrong. And if you look hard enough, everyone knows you look hard
Yeah.
enough to find something. There's always something to
Right.
complain about. That was my experience as well, where I had, I unfortunately some traumatic things going on in my youth, and then some big losses in life after that. And I never really learned how to keep a positive attitude.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I think that is what happens to people that get in these negative loops and mindsets, and they can't get out, and they don't know that there's
Mm-hmm. I like what you just said. It's a loop. And you don't know how to get off the merry-go-round. This is all you know. You're comfortable with it. How do I get out of it? You literally don't know how to fight your way out of it. So it's either never been modeled, you've never learned it. It didn't sink in when someone told it to you. And so it goes back to what you said earlier. They're going to have to learn it the hard way. But, things that cause negative attitude, illness, disease, past trauma, mental health, chemical imbalances, even though there's a myriad of different reasons, the solutions are usually the same.
yes, it's
So
really a choice. It is absolutely a choice. It is the only thing many times, and look at your husband's situation. It was the only thing he did have control over,
that
because
is it.
his body was attacking itself at that
Yeah,
point,
it
shutting
was
down.
shutting down. It literally was, literally and figuratively, every organ system was. It's like when you power down a computer, it was just all going, new, 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 new.
Yep.
Yeah. When your vision goes, you can't hardly speak. Your speech is gone. You can't swallow. I mean, every organ in his body. So, when we are in the world, so we're going to have to deal with these people. And so, how do we deal with these negative people? So, we know we can control our attitude. We
Yep.
obviously can't control other people's attitude, but
Right.
what do we do when we're forced to interact with these negative people? I was working with a client not too long ago, and it was excruciating because their negative attitude was rough. And it
Yeah.
was even beginning to rub off on me to the point I finally had to break up with this client
Mm.
because they were refusing to do the steps to make progress that would help them move forward.
Yes.
So some of the things I had to learn was detaching
Yep.
and boundaries, avoiding the blame, taking it on as it was my fault. I had to respond calmly and I had to be firm, even when it was so uncomfortable because I had affection for this person. But I could no longer help them. They were beyond my skill level. The same as if that person came and stood in my living room bleeding to death and said, "Don't take me to the hospital. I just want to be with you." It's if I really love and care about you, I'm gonna have to kinda push you onto someone else that can
That's right.
help you,
That's right.
and me too, because it became beyond my abilities to help this person. So,
Yeah.
what do you have to say about that?
Yeah. Well, we talked in the last episode in the relationship episode about boundaries, and boundaries as knowing where we end and others begin, and knowing what we need to do to keep ourselves safe or in recovery, or kind of on our path. And many times if we have negative people, we know that our relationships in recovery change. And I have dealt with negative people in my circle because I'm very empathetic. There
Right.
there was a very long period of my life that I would attract very negative people, or I would attract people who had,
Mhm.
hidden negative traits, right? Or hidden negative
Mhm.
mindsets. And then those would, kind of come out, and it's like, okay, hold on. This is not who I need around me. So there were
Right.
times where I would have to, break up with friends, so to speak, and certainly had to break up a couple of relationships when in my dating years, because they were negative and very draining. And at one point, it was somebody who unfortunately had a mental illness,
Mm.
and it was borderline personality, and I actually had to put a restraining order on them.
Mm.
It was a horrible experience. But
Mhm.
that was mental illness, right? That there's a
Mhm.
line, but in the society we're in, because our processed foods can mimic the results of the processed foods in our bodies and brains can mimic so many symptoms of mental illness.
Right. Oh,
It's
wow.
really important to, when we're dealing with negative people, I mean, on the road, on a plane,
Mm-hmm.
at work, anywhere, you're going to encounter negative people. And it's really important to just detach, right? Let it go. Like, you're you, I'm me, you do you, I'll be over here doing me,
Mm-hmm.
right? No harm, no foul, no judgment,
Mm-hmm.
but I'm going to keep myself safe
Yeah.
by not interacting and not letting your energy in.
Yeah. Do you think you can even progress in life without this positive attitude? Can you reach your goals and
Oh
if
no,
you're I don't think so either.
you
It's
wouldn't even
pretty
have a goal because you'd think you wouldn't hit it.
Yeah. Yeah, great point. I think it's pretty tough. It really robs you of your joy. If we didn't have a positive can-do attitude, there's no way we could have even put this podcast together. No
Yeah.
way. I
Nope.
had to stay positive through this huge learning curve. Guys, I am not technical. It overwhelms me almost more than anything, and I
You're
want to
doing
know
great.
it. Yeah, I've really turned into a big girl and I've had to do a few things that were very uncomfortable, but I kept repeating, I'm capable of learning anything, even technology. I still have a long ways to go, but I never stopped and said, okay, this is too hard. I'm throwing in the dice. I'm out. I'm going to pick up my dominoes and go home. So the attitude just helps us keep pushing forward even when it's hard and you run into roadblocks. It's it 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 is the one thing why we're here today is because of our willingness to learn new things. And you're technically savvy, but you'd never done this before either.
No, no,
So
it's a huge learning curve.
I
Huge
don't
learning curve.
there's a saying about I've got more s- I've got more energy than smarts or something like that. In
I-
other words, I'm saying it wrong, but you get the
yeah,
gist that
yeah, I
I'm
know what
just
you mean.
blindly moving forward, even though I don't know what we're doing. We're gonna figure this out. So, and here we are, 16
Here we
episodes.
are. That's right. That's right. 16 episodes in.
Yeah,
No, nobody's dead. Nobody's in jail.
yeah. So far, the
We're-
day's young. It's just mid-afternoon here.
but we're doing okay. And you
Yeah,
know
we're
what?
doing all right.
There's there's only upside, right? To learning and to growing and to bringing the message to people. And you know what?
Yeah.
If I have to send a smoke signal, if I have to do, some kind of carrier pigeon
Mm.
communication to get people to understand our message, I'll do that too. I'll go back to the old ways, seances, whatever, whatever.
I'm going to go out on a limb and say that this episode 16, even though we're 16 deep, I think it's one of our most important messages that we've ever, even up there with food and things like that, sleep, everything. Attitude is just, it's life saving. It's life saving.
Life-saving, life-giving.
Yeah.
It is, it really, and um, it's so interesting because I think about your story and the health challenges with your husband and his journey. My mom, we lost her in 2004 suddenly, and it was because of sepsis. She has
Oh, I never
septicemia.
knew.
It was a secondary infection from
Oh,
bronchitis
wow.
that landed in her. It landed in her pancreas, or her pancreas was inflamed, and it had ruptured, and she was
Oh,
septic
so
by that point.
sorry.
And so there are minutes, right? Minutes matter with septicemia. And
Oh, yeah.
I'm in the healthcare field, and I hear all kinds of stories, about sepsis and those adverse events, right, that happen. And my mom was one of them. And so it's so interesting to know that, my mom didn't have a positive attitude.
Right.
She spoke up, but not enough. And she
Mm-hmm.
believed that she wasn't emergent enough. She believed that she wasn't as important a case to be seen in that
Mm.
emergency room. She sat in an emergency room for 12 hours
Oh, wow. That's
waiting to be triaged. And
not with yeah, with sepsis, that's a lifetime.
that's exactly. And she died at 4 a.m. the next morning after they admitted her in the evening, 7 o'clock in the evening, the
Yeah,
night before. She was already past the point of no return. Her organs
that's
were shutting down. She was
yeah.
shutting down.
I think I've told you before, I called the EMS at 1 in the morning because I just was restless. Something wasn't right. And he just wasn't being clear. And they said, had I waited till morning, he would have been dead at home.
Yeah.
So you are so right on about your mom's story. It progresses that fast. And I'm very sorry that happened.
Well, but attitude of her attitude of, even the family member that was there advocating for her, their attitude was, her issues aren't emergent enough, and they couldn't get the right attention. And
Mm,
I'm certainly not blaming them at all, because they didn't know, right? The
right.
medical professionals right there in the building with them weren't assessing her appropriately either, right? So
Hmm.
huge breakdown of communication.
Right.
But there was also, I think, this limiting belief inside my mom that her needs didn't matter. And
Hmm.
I believe that even that kind of attitude can contribute to negative
Right.
outcomes.
Sure. One last thing I want to talk about, because I think most people deal with this out there in the world, is your attitude in the workplace. And do you think it affects your ability to rise up in the company? I work mostly from home. You work more in a corporate setting.
Mhm.
So do you have an opinion about your ability to rise up in the workplace when it comes to attitude?
I see it all the time. I
Mm-hmm.
I I always study people. People are fascinating to me, and human
Mm-hmm.
behavior fascinates me for good reasons and not so good reasons. But as I study our senior leadership team, and I see them interacting, and I see them at different events and meetings, I will say that the common threads are they are very stable, they are very calm, they are
Mm-hmm.
very positive, they are very uplifting to others around them.
Mm-hmm.
They're overall, they might have concerns, but they don't let it overwhelm them. And these are leaders of a major healthcare network in a
Right.
part of the country that is highly populated.
Mm-hmm.
They were ground zero for COVID.
Wow.
Um, these are the leaders that when Sully's plane went into the Hudson, they treated all of the patients. These are
Wow.
responders that treated and triaged 9/11 victims.
Oh, wow.
These, they're at the epicenter, right? In the New York area. And so they have to keep a mindset, not only in healthcare, but in healthcare in a really, really densely populated area of the country. They have to really focus on what we can control and how we can keep a positive attitude. And I see them in these, in meetings, in board meetings or executive councils, and when things get heated, they will say what needs to be said. They'll say it assertively, calmly, and they will completely detach from however the other person takes it.
Yeah.
They don't allow the other people's reactions or lack of reaction to affect them. They keep their sort of boundary bubbles around them. And now I don't do I think that they're all born that way? No. I
Right.
I I know enough in executive and leadership development coaching to know that those traits are coached. They're
Yeah.
coached into people. That as you advance in the ranks of an organization, you're given coaching. It's one of the I guess rites of passage of
Mm-hmm.
growing in a corporate environment. You get coached in leadership traits, and one of those advanced leadership skills, executive leadership skills, is around you know um, response, pausing, emotional regulation, breathing,
Right.
all of those things that we learn in recovery, because there are many, leaders of organizations, not thankfully not the one I'm part of, but many leaders of organizations around the world that are rageaholics and narcissists and, really emotionally dysregulated people that throw
Right.
tantrums like 5-year-olds when they don't get their way.
Yeah.
We've all heard the stories of like these corporate leaders, right, in the world.
Mm-hmm.
And I will say that those companies are as dysfunctional as their leaders, just like the
Right.
children are as dysfunctional as the parents.
Mm-hmm.
So if our leaders and thankfully in the healthcare setting, they're not, right, but our leaders are, they have their wits about them. They know that their actions impact their teams below. So
Right.
they're very careful about the way they choose. And if you want to grow in your organization, you'll observe that and apply it, but you'll also see it as a way, if even if you're taking out the trash or cooking other people's meals at your company. If you're sort of the 9 to 5er kind of punching in and punching out and doing your thing, you have no aspirations for the corner offices. Your attitude still matters because you're the person that people come in to see at their
Right.
breaks or in between meetings, and they see you and they remember you and they
Yeah.
appreciate you, and
Yeah.
you walk away with a really good feeling because you've given someone a little piece of happiness that day.
Yeah. Huge. I'm so glad that you addressed this. I've got one last question, and then we've got a couple of viewer or listener questions. But I wanted to end on this topic because I just think it's just a perfect wrap up topic. But what is your attitude around eating healthy, eating clean, single ingredient foods? Do you feel deprived or angry about it? Do you have an attitude when it comes to movement, sleep, water, recovery efforts? Do you grieve your old food life? And I want to tell you, I can sit here and I could have a big pity party about that and all the things that I'm missing
Yeah.
out on. Or I could go, you know what? This is the best gift I've ever given to myself. It's freedom versus bondage. So
Yes.
my attitude around single ingredient food, missing out on the birthday cakes at birthday parties or Christmas desserts, I am so relieved that I don't have to fight that battle anymore and invite pain and suffering. I don't have to do it the hard way. I can do life much more pleasant. And so, why would I ever have a bad attitude about all these beautiful things that I do for myself, starting
Yeah.
with clean eating?
Yeah. Yeah. And the way I look at it is I can choose my hard. I love that phrase, choose my hard. I can choose my
Yeah,
hard now, and that's how I used to think of it. I used to think of clean eating and saying no to the world of addictive food. I used to think of that as hard. And then, when I understood, a little bit of pain now means that I don't have the hard later of
right,
I work in hospitals all the time. I see families spending hours and frustrating phone calls and
right,
pharmacies and the expenses and the insurance companies and the doctors and the appointments and taking time off of work. And that's hard. Getting,
right.
as Dr. Caldwell Esselstyn talks about, beaten reverse heart disease. He talks about, people think it's so hard not to eat really greasy,
Yeah,
food and things that are laden in artery clogging ingredients. He says, well, that is a lot easier than laying on a bench and getting your chest cracked open to
right,
have your arteries rerouted, like
right,
that's and bypassed.
right,
That's really hard
right.
compared to just saying no to the pizza, right? So it's
Yeah.
just
Hmm.
it's so fascinating. Yeah. So choose your heart. I grieved for sure. I grieved when I realized I needed to be abstinent on the processed food. But I mean, I grieved it for like a night. Like I wasn't
Hmm.
grieving in like, support groups about it. I,
Yeah.
I, I was in recovery groups, but it wasn't because I was grieving the food. It was because I didn't know, I didn't have the tools to live and react and respond to life in a healthy way. So that's what I needed to learn because I'd used food to just numb everything else.
Right.
So yeah, I did grieve it. But now that I'm past that, I don't look at it anymore as a loss. I look at it as, man, like it is momentary. It took me, I started to time myself. It took me seconds to eat something that was
Right.
a cookie, a donut, seconds. I mean, 30 seconds or
Yeah.
a minute. It took me to eat a meal of really junk food. It would take me what, 20, 30 minutes maybe.
Yeah. Hmm.
For that number of minutes, I would have days of pain,
Right.
have hours and
Hmm.
hours of beating myself up and blood pressure issues and diabetes concerns and doctor visits. And why? For 30 minutes of
Right.
it's crazy. And it's
Yeah.
not 30 minutes. It's really, the way I used to eat probably was closer to 10 or 15.
Yeah. Hmm.
Just
Yeah.
the math doesn't add up.
Right. This is a better deal. And I'm here to tell you that clean eating also accentuates a positive attitude as
Absolutely.
well. So they really go hand in hand. I'm so glad we had a chance to talk about this today. I just huge, huge, huge. I've enjoyed this episode immensely.
Me
Oh,
too.
I've got a couple of quick viewer questions. I think we can just do them pretty quickly. I keep hearing I need to process things in order to be in recovery. What does that even mean to process your emotions? And is it really even necessary? I think I'm fine. You,
So good question. This is something that it's really near and dear to my heart because I spent most of my life pushing my emotions down with food or resisting them, right? Saying, oh, that's not really what's happening inside of me. I'm just going to push that away and resist and resist. And as we know, that what you resist persists. And now what processing my emotions to me means is, instead of pushing against them, now I'm just like, okay, come on in. What's going on? What are you feeling? Oh, oh, there's some resentment there. Or, oh, there's some sadness there. Where's that coming from? Oh my God, I would feel sad if I had that happen too. I talk to the parts of me that are experiencing these emotions, and I self-soothe and I reconnect and I acknowledge and validate how those parts are feeling. And usually it's an inner child or an inner teen or some past part of me that feels these things and has these memories, or is reacting to something new in life that is based on an old hurt. And I will be able to literally process the emotion. Process means acknowledge, accept, validate, turn it around if possible, comfort, forgive if there's forgiveness that needs to happen, self-forgiveness or other forgiveness, and move on and
yeah,
let it go and move on. That's
brilliant.
processing.
I've never heard that definition that way, but I hope everybody heard that, and if not, they need to rewind and listen to that again. That was excellent.
Sure. Well, I think we should dive deeper into an episode about this because
Emotional
there's a lot there.
processing.
There's a lot there.
Mhm. The last one, and then we'll wrap up here. I am noticing that the changes I am trying to make in my life are not happening easily. It's very frustrating. What am I doing wrong? And I'm here to tell you, you're doing nothing wrong. This is very normal for things to not happen easily or quickly. Change and new habits take time. Just be patient, but more importantly, remain consistent, because
Yes.
that's where you're going to find the success, is if you just consistently keep at it. So
Okay.
change doesn't happen easily. Just hang in there. And you know what? You're here listening to us. That is a point in your favor for making change. So
That's
good
right.
job. Good job to you that are here.
Very true.
Well, that wraps things up. Thank you so much. I appreciate your the time we spend together. Very
Always,
valuable.
always, always. And you know what? Come back soon because when on future episodes, we're going to be talking about how to travel and navigate food obsession and addiction recovery while traveling by air, by car, at different restaurants, with different, outside of your normal home life. And we'll
Mhm.
be talking a lot of, we'll talk more about the emotional recovery as well. That's a big topic for us. And you can always find us, guys, on any of the major social media platforms, Real Food Recovery, or on Instagram, Real Food Recovery 23. So thanks all for listening. Paige, I'll see you soon.
Bye guys.
Bye-bye.